Big 12 is going through some changes with the addition of four new teams. We have BYU, Cincinnati, Houston, and UCF coming to the Big 12 this year. And we're going to take a look at how I think those teams are going to do. There's been some changes within each of those teams that are going to be interesting to see how that plays out. And we're going to take a look at expectations. What should they be when their first year in the Big 12? And what should we look at going forward? We're going to start with my predicted best team, go all the way down to the team with probably they'll have the most struggles. We'll start with BYU. BYU is someone who is a team you can't count out. They are always going to be tough to beat, and we've seen that over the years with Kalani Sitake. I think you're looking at a program that has a great foundation. They are able to win and exceed expectations, and I think that they're going to do that again against Big 12 competition. When you look at the schedule that they have, I think you're looking at a pretty solid schedule. You're looking at a group that can, I think, do maybe not some damage, but I think that they can surprise people. Now, the non-conference schedule is going to be hard with Arkansas. I think that's always going to be a challenge. You start Big 12 play at Kansas. Kansas is much better than they have been in years past. And then you go to Cincinnati, or you host Cincinnati at home. That's just going to be a new dynamic that I'm going to have to get used to. But I think that BYU has some really exciting players coming back, and I think that they I think they can surprise some people. Now, quarterback is going to be a big question mark now that Jaron Hall is off to the NFL. That's going to be something they have to take care of and address right away. Some of the top playmakers are gone, but there's also some exciting players back as well. When you look at Isaac Rex is back at tight end. Cody Epps is a playmaker that is not getting enough attention, in my opinion. That is a good combination. Chase Roberts kind of came out of nowhere last year to surprise a lot of people. And so I think that there's a lot to like about BYU. And then when you look at what they're going against, that's a good unit to have back offensively with a new quarterback. The defense is going to be just fine. When you look at the players they have returning, they have a good amount of returners at each level, at front seven to the back seven. You look at this group, and I think that they're going to be a tough defense once again, which is good when you're facing kind of the second half of this schedule. Now, this is where this ties in because the Big 12 has some really explosive offenses, and the second half of the schedule is going to show that for BYU. A trip to TCU, a team that just competed for a national championship, that's going to be tough. Sonny Dykes knows how to put together a good offense. Texas Tech could be sneaky good. Texas is going to be good. West Virginia and Iowa State have their potentials, but I don't know how they're going to be, but still going to be tough competition. And then any year with Oklahoma and at Oklahoma State, those are two tough games as well. And that's going to be interesting to see how does BYU handle that stretch, because that's a tough. The TCU, Texas Tech, and Texas stretch is tough, but then the Oklahoma State. Honestly, I think of the four teams, BYU has the toughest schedule, but because I trust the foundation of that program so much, and they have not as much turnover as maybe some of these other teams do, that's the reason why I think they'll have the most success this year. UCF's in a decent spot, I think, with Gus Malzahn returning, and you have quite a bit of production coming back as well, and getting some players in the transfer portal that it'll be interesting to see how those players turn out. And it's going to be fun to see what Gus Malzahn can do with UCF in their first year in the Big 12. This is a program that's had a ton of success as of recently, and this is a fan base that has high expectations. I think that they expect to do really well in the Big 12. They don't care that they came from the AAC. They don't care that this year maybe wasn't their best year they've had, but they expect to be really, really good. And I think when you look at the start that they have, non-conference play outside of Boise State, the trip to Boise State, that's going to be a really fun game to watch, in my opinion. I think one of the better group of five games, even though UCF's not group of five anymore, but a group of five opponent that is really tough. Boise State is going to be, I think, really good this year, and UCF has a chance to prove that they are the better team. There's a reason why they went to the Big 12, and that's a good opportunity. Then when you look at the conference play, The first three games, honestly, are tough games. They're maybe not the games that you would expect if you're a traditionalist that's paid attention to the Big 12 up until last year. You're looking at Kansas State, who just competed for a Big 12 championship, Baylor, who competed for a Big 12 championship 2 years ago, and a Kansas team that we just talked about is much better than they have been in the past. Then, when you look at the second half of the schedule, a trip to Oklahoma is going to be tough for any of these teams, even any of the teams in the Big 12. I don't expect Oklahoma to have the struggles that they had last year. Now that this coaching staff is a little bit more settled in, Brent Venables has a chance to get his system in, get guys more comfortable. Jeff Lebby has a chance to get the offense going. That's going to be a really tough game for UCF. Hosting West Virginia, again, West Virginia, I don't know what they're going to be, and there's a lot that Neil Brown needs to fix, but then you got some work to do, but also there's some potential for them to surprise some people. And then two of the last four games feature teams that they've already seen in Cincinnati and Houston. That shouldn't be anything new. Oklahoma State and Texas Tech is sandwiched in between those two, is where things get interesting. And it's going to be interesting for everybody because no one has really seen each other. They don't have a ton of film on each other. This is going to be a new experience. And then when Texas and Oklahoma leave, that makes a different dynamic as well. So that's going to be really fun to see. UCF has some really interesting road games. I think that Kansas State and Kansas are going to be tough for them. Cincinnati, maybe not so much. It's still tough to play at Nippert Stadium, so that's interesting. Oklahoma obviously is the toughest one there. Texas Tech is also a tricky one. Houston knows that very well, and UCF is going to get. You'll know who UCF is by the time that they get to that game. So UCF, I think that they're going to have a pretty solid season, pretty solid first season in the Big 12. I think that they'll hit some road bumps as well. The schedule, the road games aren't very favorable, but this is a team that's tough, has some talent returning, has good players returning at key positions, and that's huge for a team entering a new conference. So I think there are some expectations for Houston going into the Big 12, but I don't know what the coaching staff's going to have for expectations. I don't know what the team's going to have for expectations. The reason I say that is when you went into last year in 2022, I think almost everybody that paid attention to college football expected Houston to compete and or win a conference championship. You had a team that competed for the AAC championship against Cincinnati 2 years ago, and they had a lot of production returning that made them the favorite by a lot of people. I think a lot of people were picking Houston to win the AAC, and then for them to have maybe not the season that they expected, still a pretty good season, but not the season that everybody expected, didn't meet expectations. I think people were disappointed. And then Dana Holgerson comes out and said that that wasn't their expectations. I'm not sure what their expectations or their goals were, but if it wasn't a conference championship, I have no idea what their expectations are going to be for the Big 12. Yes, I think a lot of people have limited expectations compared to last year, that at least they've reeled them back. But this is still a team that honestly, what are we doing? I think you have to ask that question. If Dana Holgerson isn't expecting to win a conference championship last year with the production that he had returning, with the talent he had returning, then why do we have any reason to believe that they have big expectations heading into the Big 12? It's a bigger jump. There's tougher competition. And honestly, if you're not expecting to win a conference championship with the situation you had last year, then I don't know if like a bowl game is that the max you're going to do. So I'm really interested to see there. Now, this is a program, honestly, that has quite a bit to fix. Dana Holgerson's offense was pretty good with Clayton Tune and Tank Dell, but now you lose both of them. You lose a couple guys on the offensive line. You lose some skill position players. The defense loses a number of key pieces, although maybe that's a good thing with how much they struggled last year. And when you're a team that has a struggling defense, heading into the Big 12 maybe isn't the best time. This is maybe not the best time to do that, but Houston has an opportunity to prove itself. Now, they added Donovan Smith from Texas Tech in the transfer portal to run the offense. Obviously, he hasn't won the job, but he's probably going to win, in my opinion, just early on. Now, the defense returns a number of key pieces that are going to be really fun to watch. I think that's huge. Doug Belk was one of the rising stars in the coordinator positions. And obviously, last year didn't do him any favors, but I think that he's still a very good defensive mind. He has these guys in good positions, but tackling was obviously a problem. when you look at the schedule, the game against UTSA is not going to be easy. UTSA is coming into the AAC after being in Conference USA, and they nearly upset Houston to start the year. So that's going to be another challenging game for Houston. It's UTSA returns their quarterback and a trio of wide receivers that are going to be a problem once again. This is going to be a good game for both teams, and it's going to really determine how well Houston is going to do in the Big 12 early on. When you ignore the other two non-conference games, you get the TCU home game to start Big 12 play in week 3. That is going to be an extremely tough game, even with the turnover for TCU. And it's going to kind of give us another gauge of where Houston stands. Then you go a trip to Texas Tech. That's not a new opponent for Houston, fortunately, so they don't have to learn a ton about that program, a ton about that team. That's really nice. West Virginia comes to town. Texas comes to town. I think that maybe it kind of depends. I think that it's going to be sold out regardless of how good or bad Houston will be this year. I don't think they're going to be bad. I just don't think that they're going to be that good. Maybe I'm wrong, but Texas has been a team that they've been calling for a long time, and now they get a chance to play them at least for 1 year. So that is in a matchup that I think a lot of people are excited for. And if Houston somehow finds a way, because when we look at this schedule, yes, they can beat UTSA. They'll beat Rice. TCU is probably a loss. Sam Houston State should be a win. At Texas Tech is probably a loss. I think at best you're looking 3-2, maybe 4-1 through that stretch. West Virginia should be a win. So again, you're looking at 4-2, 5-1 heading into the Texas game. I think that's pretty good, honestly. I think that is a good place for Houston to be. That should be the expectation, honestly. And again, I don't know what expectations are going to be, but that's what it should be. Texas is going to be a fun game. Now, I think Texas is going to be much better than they were last year, so that may adds a different element to it as well. Then you look at the next game, that is maybe a huge emotional game for Houston to be able to do that and then go to Kansas State. That is a potential disaster waiting to happen. Kansas State, that atmosphere is going to be very different, and that's something that Houston's going to have to battle, and Dana's going to have to get his guys up to speed. Now, when you look at the next few games, two of them, Cincinnati and UCF, two teams that they are familiar with. Don't really talk about that. At Baylor, a 2-game road stretch there with Kansas State and Baylor. That's really tough. Oklahoma State at home is a tough home game as well. So it's a tough end to the season, but it's going to give us a good feel of where Dana has this program and where they're going to need to go. Again, UCF at the end that's a tough road game to end the year. But again, this is a Houston program that has had high expectations. Whether everyone agrees with them or not remains to be seen. But Houston should be able to find a way to be successful early on. And then from there, we're going to get a good gauge of where this program stands and how they can improve and get better as the years go on. Now, it pains me to say that Cincinnati, to me, is going to be the worst team of these four. Now, what that means record-wise, I'm not sure yet, but I know that I think this is going to be a program that takes a step back. When you lose most of your coaching staff, actually pretty sure all of it, and you lose a program builder like Luke Fickell, you're going to take a step back. Now, you bring in Scott Satterfield, which I think is a good hire. I think that his time at Louisville wasn't great, but this is a guy who can still coach. He can still produce really fun offenses, really exciting offenses. And I think that this is going to be a transition year. And when you bring in a new coach, it's going to take some time. It's going to take some time to get adjusted, the new staff, the new system, the new players. Everything is going to take some time. And that's the reason I think that Cincinnati is going to struggle because they're going to have all these new things on top of losing a ton of talent. This is a program that has been super successful, 53 wins in the last 5 years. That is really, really good. And now Fickell is off to Wisconsin. You bring in a new coaching staff. You're going to have a new system on offense. The defense is probably going to have another new system. And eventually that's going to catch up to you. Now, the talent they have returning on both sides of the ball makes life maybe a little bit easier, but it's still going to take some time for everybody to get acclimated. And you're joining a new conference. When you look at the non-conference schedule, a trip to Pitt isn't going to be easy. And That's going to be tough. Miami of Ohio always seems to give Cincinnati trouble. Now, what that means in terms of if you're looking at an upset or whatnot, I'm not entirely sure, but it's going to be probably closer than a lot of people expect. To start Big 12 play, you're welcome to Big 12 is a home game against Oklahoma, which I think is a cool dynamic. Having Oklahoma come to Nippert, that I think one of the coolest things about Cincinnati, BYU, UCF, and Houston is some of these home games, you bring in teams that don't normally go there. And honestly, I think that's really cool. When you have a team like Oklahoma going to Cincinnati on a road game for the Sooners, that's really fun. That brings in a new dynamic. It gives fans something to be excited about. Now, if Cincinnati is 3-0, that that atmosphere is going to be electric. That is going to be a fun game to watch. And it's going to be tough, but I think it's going to be really fun. Follow that up. They go to BYU. Again, another, even though they're both new, Cincinnati and BYU don't play each other normally. So another game that's going to be really fun. Cincinnati traveling to Provo to play the Cougars. That's going to be a really fun game to me. Again, a lot of these matchups just are really fun matchups. Iowa State at home. That's going to be tough. Iowa State is really tough to beat. Following that up with Baylor as well, another team that is tough to beat as well. A trip to Oklahoma State. I don't know what Oklahoma State's going to be. That's another team I want to keep an eye on, see kind of what they're doing. I don't really know where Mike Gundy has that program going. Maybe it's a year where they take a step back. Who knows? The next two games, two teams they've already faced, UCF and Houston. Nothing really talked there. At West Virginia is going to be tough, I think, with what Cincinnati has going on, and then home game against Kansas. Honestly, I don't like saying that I think Cincinnati is going to maybe go 4-8 between. It feels like 4-8 and 6-6 is that range right now for them. Obviously, that could change as the offseason goes on. When we dive into more predictions later on, we will see. But when you look at it, I think BYU, you're probably looking anywhere from the 7-9 win range. UCF is probably about the same. Houston, honestly, Houston is in the 5-7 win range for me. I don't really know. I don't really know what to think of them. And then, like I said, Cincinnati probably in the 4-6, and that hurts me to say. And when we take more of a deep dive into the schedules and look at the talent returning, then we'll have a better idea of what our predictions are going to be. So stay tuned for that. But it's going to be fun to see what these four teams can do. It's going to be fun to see this new dynamic of the Big 12, at least while Texas and Oklahoma are still here. And then there's going to be a new dynamic when they leave. That's just going to be really fun to see. I think it's a fun opportunity, a fun new beginning for everybody involved. And for these four teams, it may not be successful as they want right away, but they're just getting their feet wet. And it's going to be fun to see how each team adjusts for the long term.